Hello! It's Elaine again, once again doing a random review of a book I've read recently, because I have opinions about everything. Today's review will be on Firestarter by Stephen King. I don't particularly like reading books that I know a lot about an author before I read the book. It makes it hard not to hear their voice in the narration, which I don't like to do. I want to disappear into a story, which is hard to do when I'm thinking, ah, yes, this references the author's own drug addiction, or, oh, so this was the part he chose to cast himself in this book. I don't want to be thinking about the author. I want to be thinking about the story. And frankly, I know way too much about Stephen King to completely let that happen. That being said, I'm now going to talk about the author. I think King is an author that we don't always give credit as much as he's due. Don't get me wrong, he is beloved, he's widely read, he's a household name, but I think we tend to think of him as a pulpy, cinematic author, best at writing stories destined to be B-horror movies. And he is, but the books of his I've read, I've been surprised by how much depth hides under the attacking hedges, murderous cars, and Drew Barrymore blowing shit up with her mind. This is a book about the Vietnam War. America's guilt, the weapons we developed for the war, and the people we broke. I mean, not literally. Literally, it's about a little girl who can start fires with her mind, and the government agency that's trying to capture her for nefarious purposes. But metaphorically, it's about Vietnam. Vietnam is everywhere in this book. Yes, there's obvious things like several of the characters are Vietnam vets, but it's also in the way the normal people interact with the US government. It's in the way the US government treats these characters. It's a lot in the whole concept of secret, not secret government agencies developing horrific weapons. Like, it's really everywhere. And, like, the war itself, I think, is not the thing that was the spark, pun fully intended, for this book. It's the effect the war had on the American psyche. The loss of the gloss that the American government was doing great things everywhere and would never be defeated. Yay. And a lot of the characters who do declare themselves veterans of Vietnam, or are mentioned in text as being veterans, turn out to sort of be monsters. Which really, it follows the zeitgeist of the time of the war creating monsters. And in a very literal sense, Charlie is created by the war because the government basically started this experiment to give people psychic powers as a weapon for war. And she is treated as nothing more than a weapon. And I think that was speaking to the fact that a lot of the soldiers from that war feel like they were treated as nothing but weapons. Even Rainbird, who I'll get into in a minute, is very dehumanized by his time at war. So yeah, Firestarter is about Vietnam. And it ain't even subtle about it. But damn, was that lost in the movie. Or maybe not. I saw the movie when I was like 14, so I don't trust my ability to read metaphor at that age. It is so much more than I would have expected from Stephen King. That made me like this book a lot more than I expected. Things I didn't like about it? So I know this book was published in 1980, but damn, there's a lot of casual racism in this book. Some of it King is using as a device, showing us this character is a dick. And casual racism is an easy shorthand to very clearly put an audience in the mindset of, oh, this person's not a good person. Even to get audiences ready to cheer for someone's demise. But there's a lot of casual racism in this book, and it gets really odious to read. And one element that is not a device giving us power to cheer when somebody dies horrifically is Rainbird. Rainbird is described as a Native American character, and there are moments in this book that feel like King was just throwing every cliche about Native Americans at the wall and seeing what stuck. He's able to move so quietly you can't hear him enter a room. He talks about hunting a fuck ton. He likes to go out in the desert. He talks about the white men all the time. He wears his long black hair in a ponytail. He seems to be vaguely believing in some form of nebulous idea of spirits. He's inhumanly patient. Now, don't get me wrong about this either. Like, Rainbird is a nuanced character. There's a lot going on with him, but a lot of it is stereotype. And making this worse, he's also an inhuman monster who seems to get off on the idea of brutally murdering a little girl. Also, a quick side note here, he's not the only one that seems to think of Charlie in weirdly sexual tones. Like, I know it was written in the late 70s, and the 70s had a lot of sexualization of young girls, but I'm not sure what the hell that Stephen King was going for with multiple characters, thinking about how this 8-year-old would be so dateable when she got a little bit older. But setting that aside for now, the point here is Rainbird is a rather harmful combination of really common stereotypes about Native Americans and dangerous and inhuman. This combination presents a uncomfortable message that Native Americans are dangerous and inhuman. Now, do I think King meant that? No, honestly, I really don't. And I'm guessing he probably regrets some of it now. But it's there, and we sort of gotta acknowledge that. And it got me thinking about why the racism in this book bothered me a lot more than the racism in books that I read from the 1800s. And honestly, the 1800 ones, usually the racism is more obvious and worse. But I can look at Friday in Robinson Crusoe and just immediately dismiss the character as BS. It stinks to high heaven to a modern reader. We see that and go, yeah, Friday's not a real human, he is a stereotype. But this is too close. I grew up watching these stereotypes on television, in movies, on radio shows, in books. Like, within the last decade, these stereotypes have appeared in movies and radio and television and books. And that makes it a little bit more odious because I know that it's more harmful. And I think it doesn't help that I was surprised by how much I liked this book, and therefore the racism really stood out. It made me viscerally uncomfortable, and not in the way that I think King intended. Also, there was sexism left, right, and center, but I'm going to leave that behind in 1980. Otherwise, I would say that I was impressed by this book. I just hope Stephen King has released an updated version with a hair less casual racism. Just a little bit less. A little bit. A little bit.